The Castle of Kerglas. Paranek was a poor idiot who belonged to nobody, and he would have died of starvation if it had not been for the kindness of the village people, who gave him food whenever he chose to ask for it. As for a bed, when night came and he grew sleepy, he looked about for a heap of straw, and making a hole in it, crept in like a lizard. Idiot though that he was never unhappy, but always thanked gratefully those who fed him, and sometimes would stop for a little and sing to them. For he could imitate a lark so well that no one knew which was Paranek and which was the bird. He had been wandering the forest one day for several hours, and in the evening approached he suddenly felt very hungry. Luckily, just at that place the trees grew thinner, and he could see a small farmhouse a little way off. Paranek went straight towards it, and found the farmer's wife standing in the door holding in her hands a large bowl of which her children had already eaten their supper. "I am hungry. Will you give me something to eat?" asked the boy. "If you can find anything here, you are welcome to it," answered she, and indeed there was not much left, but everybody's spoon had dipped in it. But Paranek ate what was there with a hearty appetite, and thought that he had never tasted such good food. "It is made with the finest flour, and mixed with the richest milk, and stirred with by the best cook in all the countryside." And he thought he said it to himself. The woman heard him. "Poor innocent," she murmured. "He does not know what he is saying, but I will cut him a slice of that new wheaten loaf." And so she did, and Paranek ate up every crumb, and declared that nobody less than the bishop's baker could have baked it. This flattered the farmer's wife so much that she gave him some butter to spread on it. And Paranek was still eating it on the doorstep when an armed knight rode up. "Can you tell me the way to the castle of Kerglas?" asked he. "To Kerglas? Are you really going to Kerglas?" cried the woman, turning pale. "Yes, and in order to get there I have to come from a country far off that has taken me 3 months' hard riding to travel as far as this." "And why do you want to go to Kerglas?" she said. "I am seeking the basin of gold and the lance of diamonds which are in the castle," he answered. Then Paranek looked up. "Basin and the lance are very costly things," he said suddenly. "More costly and precious than all the crowns in the world," replied the stranger. "For not only will the basin finish with the best food that you can dream of, but if you drink from it, it will cure any illness, however dangerous, and will even bring back the dead to life if it touches their mouths. As to the diamond lance, that will cut through any stone or metal." "And to whom do these wonders belong?" asked Paranek in amazement. "To a magician named Rokia who lives in the castle," answered the woman. "Every day he passes along here, mounted on a black mare, with a colt 13 months old trotting behind. But no one dares to attack him, as he carries his lance." "This is true," said the knight, "but there's a spell laid upon him which forbids him from using it within the castle of Kerglas. The moment he enters, the basin and the lance are put away in a dark cellar, which no key but one can open, and that is the place where I wish to fight the magician." "You will never overcome him, Sir Knight," replied the woman, shaking her head. "More than 100 gentlemen have ridden past this house bent on the same errand, and not one has ever come back." "I know that, good woman," returned the knight, "but then they did not have, like me, instructions from the hermit of Blavet." "And what did the hermit tell you?" said Paranek. "He told me that I should have to pass through the wood full of all sorts of enchantments and voices, which would try to frighten me and make me lose my way. Most of those who have gone before me have wandered where they not know, and perished from cold, hunger, and fatigue." "Well, suppose you get through safely," said the idiot. "If I do," continued the knight, "then I will meet a sort of fairy armed with a needle of fire, which burns the ashes all it touches. This dwarf stands guarding an apple tree, from which I am bound to pluck an apple." "And next?" inquired Paranek. Next, I shall find the flower that laughs, protected by a lion whose mane is formed of vipers. I must pluck that flower, and go on to the lake of the dragons, and fight the black man who holds his hand of iron ball which never misses its mark, and returns of its own accord to its master. After that, I must enter the Valley of Pleasure, where one who conquered all the other obstacles have left their bones. If I can win through all this, I shall reach a river with only one ford, where a lady in black will be seated. She will mount my horse behind me, and tell me what I am to do next." He paused, and the woman shook her head. "You'll never be able to do all that," she said, but he bade her remember that these were only matters for men, and galloped away down the path she pointed out. The farmer's wife sighed, and giving Perronick some more food, bade him good night. The idiot rose and was opening the gate which led into the forest, when the farmer himself came up. "I want a boy to tend my cattle," he said abruptly, "as what I had has run away. Will you stay and do it?" And Perronick, though he loved his liberty and hated work, recollected the good food he had eaten, and agreed to stop. At sunrise he collected the herd carefully and led them to a rich pasture which lay along the borders of the forest, cutting himself a hazel wand with which to keep them in order. This task was not quite so easy as it looked, for the cows had a way of straying into the wood. By the time he had brought one back, another was off. He was gone a good distance into the trees after a naughty black cow which gave him more trouble than all the rest, when he heard the noise of a horse's feet. Peeping through the leaves, he beheld the giant Rogier seated on his mare, with a colt trotting behind. Round the giant's neck hung the golden bowl suspended from a chain, and in his hand he grasped the diamond lance, which gleamed like fire. But as soon as he was out of sight, the idiot sought in vain for the traces of the path he had taken. This happened not only once, but many times, till Perronick grew so used to him that he never troubled to hide. But on each occasion he saw him, the desire to possess the bowl and the lance became stronger. One evening the boy was sitting alone on the edge of the forest, when a man with a white beard stopped beside him. "Do you want to know the way to Kerglas?" asked the idiot. And the man answered, "I know it well." "Have you been there without being killed by the magician?" cried Perronick. "Oh, he had nothing to fear from me," replied the old white-bearded man. "I'm Rogier's elder brother, the wizard Bryak. When I wish to visit him, I always pass this way, and as I even cannot go through the enchanted wood without losing myself, I call the colt to guide me." Stooping down as he spoke, he traced 3 circles on the ground, and murmured some words very low, which Perronick could not hear. Then he added aloud, "Colt, free to run and free to eat. Colt, gallop fast until we meet." And instantly the colt appeared, frisking and jumping to the wizard, who threw a halter over his neck and leapt onto his back. Perronick kept silence at the farm about this adventure, but he understood very well that if he was ever to get to Kerglas, he must first catch the colt which knew the way. Unhappily, he had not heard news of the 3 magic words uttered by the wizard, and he could not manage to draw the 3 circles. If so, he was to summon the colt at all, he must invent some other means of doing it. All day long, while he was herding the cows, he thought and thought of how he was to call the colt, for he felt that once it's on its back he could overcome the other dangers. Meantime, he must be ready in case of a chance to come soon, and he made his preparations at night, when everyone else was asleep. Remembering what he had seen the wizard do, he patched up an old halter that was hanging in a corner of the stable, twisted a rope of hemp to catch the colt's feet, and a net such as used for snaring birds. Next he sewed roughly together some bits of cloth to serve as a pocket, and he filled with glue and lark's feathers, a string of beads, a whistle of elderwood, and a slice of bread rubbed over with bacon fat. Then he went down the path which Rogier, his mare, and the colt always rode, and crumbled the bread on one side of it. Punctual to their hour, all 3 appeared, eagerly watched by Perronick, who lay hid in the bushes close by. Suppose it was useless. Suppose a mare and not the colt ate the crumbs. Suppose But now the mayor and her rider went safely by, vanishing around the corner, while the colt trotted along with its head to the ground, smelt the bread, began greedily to lick up the pieces. Oh, how good it was! Why had no one ever given it to him before? So absorbed was the little beast, sniffing about for a few more crumbs. I never heard Pernick creep up till it felt the halter on its neck and the rope around its feet. In another moment, someone on its back. Going as fast as the hobbles would allow, the colt turned into one of the wildest parts of the forest, while its rider sat trembling at the strange sights he saw. Sometimes the earth seemed to open in front of him, and he was looking into a bottomless pit. Sometimes the trees burst into flames, and he found himself in the midst of a fire. Often in the act of crossing a stream, the water rose and threatened to sweep him away again. And again, at the foot of the mountain, great rocks would roll towards him, as if they would crush him and his colt beneath their weight. To his dying day, Pernick never knew whether these things were real, or if he had only imagined them, but he pulled down his knitted cap as to cover his eyes, and trusted the colt to carry him down the right road. At last the forest was left behind, and they came out in a wide plain where the air blew fresh and strong. The idiot ventured to peep out, and found to his relief that the enchantment seemed to have ended, though a thrill of horror shot through him as he noticed the skeletons of men scattered over the plain, and beside the skeletons of the horses. And what were those gray forms trotting in the distance? Could they be wolves? But vast though the plain seemed, it did not take long to cross. Very soon the colt entered a sort of shady park, in which was standing a single apple tree. Its branches bowed down to the ground with the weight of its fruit, and in front of Corrigan, a little ferryman, holding in his hand a fiery sword, which reduced to ashes everything it touched. At the sight of Pernick, he uttered a piercing scream and raised his sword. Without appearing surprised, the youth only lifted his cap, though he took care to remain at some distance. "Do not be alarmed, my prince," said Pernick. "I'm just on my way to Kerglas, as the noble Roger begged me to come to him on business."
"Begged you to come?" repeated the dwarf. "And who, then, are you?"
"I'm a new servant he's engaged, as you know very well," answered Pernick.
"I do not know at all,"
returned Corrigan sulkily.
"and you may be a robber for all I can tell."
"I'm so sorry," replied Pernick, "but I may be wrong in calling myself a servant, for I am only a bird-catcher. But do not delay me, I pray, for his highness the magician expects me, and as you see he has lent me his colt, which I may ride to the castle all the quicker." These words, the Corrigan cast his eyes for the first time on the colt, which he knew to be the one belonging to the magician, and began to think that the young man was speaking the truth. After examining the horse, he studied the rider, who had such an innocent and indeed vacant air that he appeared incapable of inventing a story. Still, the dwarf did not feel quite right about this, and asked what the magician wanted with a bird-catcher. "From what he says, he wants one very badly," said Pernick, "as he declares that all his grain and all the fruit in his garden at Kerglas are eaten up by birds."
"And how are you going to stop that, my fine fellow?"
inquired the Corrigan, and Pernick showed him the snare he had prepared, and remarked that no bird could possibly escape from it.
"That is just what I should like to be sure of," answered the Corrigan. "My apples are completely eaten up by blackbirds and thrushes. Lay your snare, and if you manage to catch them, I will let you pass."
"That is a fair bargain." And as he spoke, Pernick jumped down and fastened the colt to the tree. Then stooping, he fixed one end of the net to the trunk of the apple tree, and he called to the Corrigan to hold the other while he took out the pegs. The dwarf did as he was bid, and suddenly Pernick threw the noose over his neck and drew it close, and the Corrigan was held fast as any of the birds he wished to snare. Shrieking with rage, he tried to undo the cord, but he only pulled the knot tighter. He had to put down the sword on the grass, and Pernick had been careful to fix the net on the other side of the tree, so that it was now easy for him to pluck an apple to mount his horse, without being hindered by the dwarf, whom he left to his fate. When they had left the plain behind them, Perinac and his steed found themselves in a narrow valley in which was a grove of trees. All sorts of sweet-smelling things. Roses of every color, yellow broom, pink honeysuckle, while above them all towered a wonderful scarlet pansy whose face bore a strange expression, for this was a flower that laughs, and no one had looked at it could help laughing too. Peronek's heart beat high at the thought that he had reached safety in the second trial, and he gazed quite calmly at the lion of the maned vipers, twisting and twirling, who walked up and down in front of the grove. The young man pulled up and removed his cap, for, idiot though he was, he knew that when you have to do the greater people yourself, a cap is more useful in the hand than on the head. Then, after wishing all kinds of good fortune to the lion and his family, he inquired if he was on the right road to Kerglas. "What is the business with Kerglas?" asked the lion with a growl, showing his teeth. "With all respect," answered Perinac, pretending to be very friend, "I'm the servant to the lady who is a friend of the noble Roger, who sends some locks for a pasty." "Locks!" cried the lion, licking his long whiskers. "Why must it be a century since I've had any? Have you a large quantity with you?"
"As many as this bag could hold," replied Perinac, opening as he spoke the bag, which had been filled with feathers and glue. But to prove that he said, he turned his back on the lion and began to imitate the song of a lark.
"Come,"
exclaimed the lion, whose mouth watered.
"Show me the birds. I should like to see if they're fat enough for my master."
"I would do it with great pleasure," answered the idiot, "but if I once open the bag, they will all fly away."
"Open it wide enough for me to look in," said the lion, drawing a little nearer. Now this is just what Perinac had been hoping for, so he held the bag while the lion opened it carefully and looked and put his head right inside, so that he might get a good mouthful of larks. But the massive feathers and glue stuck to him. Before he could pull his head out again, Perinac had drawn tight the cord and tied it in a knot so that no man could untie. Then, quickly gathering the flower that laughs, he rode off as fast as a colt would take him. The path soon led to the Lake of Dragons, which he had to swim across. The colt, who was accustomed to it, plunged into the water without hesitation. But as soon as the dragons caught sight of Perinac, they approached from all parts of the lake in order to devour him. This time Perinac did not trouble to take his cap off, but he threw the beads he had carried with him into the water, and you throw black corn onto a duck, and each bead was swallowed by a dragon, turned on his back and died, so that the idiot reached the other side without any further trouble. The valley guarded by the black man now lay before him, and from afar Perinac beheld him, chained by one foot to a rock at the entrance, and holding an iron ball which never missed its mark, and always returned to its master's hand. In his head the black man had 6 eyes that were never all shut at once, but kept one eye after the other. The moment they were all opened, Perinac knew well that if the black man caught sight of him, he would cast his ball. So, hiding the colt behind a thicket of bushes, he crawled along a ditch and crouched close to the very rock to which the black man was chained. The day was hot, and after a while the man began to grow very sleepy. 2 of his eyes closed, and Perinac sang gently. In a moment the 3rd eye shut. Perinac sang on. The lid of the 4th eye dropped heavily, and then those of the 5th and 6th eye. The black man was asleep altogether. Then on tiptoe the idiot crept back to the colt, which he led over the soft moss past the black man to the Vale of Pleasure, a delicious garden full of fruits that dangled before your mouth, and fountains running with wine, and flowers chanted in soft little voices. Further on, the tables were spread with food, and girls dancing on the grass called him to join them. Perinac heard, and, scarcely knowing what he did, drew the colt into a slower pace. He sniffed greedily the smell of the dishes, and raised his head the better to see the dancers. Another instant he would have stopped altogether and been lost, like the others before him, when suddenly there came to him like a vision the golden bowl and diamond lance. Drawing the whistle from his pocket, he blew it loudly as to drown out the sweet sounds about him, and ate what was left of his bread and bacon before craving the magic fruits. His eyes he fixed steadily on the ears of the colt, that he might not see the dancers. In this way he was able to reach the end of the garden, and at length perceived the castle of Kerglas, then the river between them, which had led the only one ford. Would the lady be there, as the old man had told him? Yes, surely she would be, sitting on a rock in a black satin dress, and her face the color of a Moorish woman's. The idiot rode up and took off his cap more politely than ever, and asked if she did not wish to cross the river. "I was waiting for you to help me do so," answered she. "Come near, that I may get up behind you." Perronick did as she bade him, and by the help of his arm she jumped nimbly on the back of the colt. "Do you know how to kill the magician?" asked she, as they were crossing the ford. "I thought that, being a magician, he was immortal, and that no one could kill him," replied Perronick. "Persuade him to taste that apple, and he will die. And if that is not enough, I will touch him with my finger, for I am the plague," answered she. "But if I kill him, how am I to get the golden bowl and the diamond lance that are hidden in the cellar without a key?" rejoined Perronick. "The flower that laughs opens all doors and lightens all darkness," said the lady, and she spoke. They reached the further bank, and advanced toward the castle. In front of the entrance was a sort of tent suspended on poles, and under it a giant was sitting, basking in the sun. As soon as he noticed the colt bearing Perronick and the lady, he lifted his head and cried in a voice of thunder,
"Why, it is nearly the idiot riding my colt 13 months old."
"Greatest of magicians, you're right," answered Perronick.
"How did you manage to catch him?"
asked the giant. "By repeating what I learned from your brother Bryak on the edge of the forest," replied the idiot. "I just said, 'Colt, run to free and free to eat. Gallop fast until we meet,' and it came directly."
"You know my brother, then?"
cried the giant.
"Tell me why he has sent you here."
"To bring you two gifts which he has just received from the country of the Moors," answered Perronick. "The apple of delight and the woman of submission. If you eat the apple, you will not desire anything else, and if you take the woman as your servant, you will never wish for another."
"Well, give me the apple, and bid the woman get down," answered Rogier.
The idiot obeyed, but the first taste of the apple and the giant staggered, and as the long yellow finger of the woman touched him, he fell dead. Leaving the magician where he lay, Perronick entered the palace, bearing with him the flower that laughs. 50 doors flew open before him, and at length he reached the long flight of steps which seemed to lead down into the bowels of the earth. Down these he went till he came to a silver door without a bar or key. Then he held up the flower high that laughs, and the door slowly swung back, displaying a deep cavern which was bright as day from the shining of the golden bowl and the diamond lance. The idiot hastily ran forward and hung the bowl around his neck from the chain which it was attached to, and took the lance in his hand. As he did so, the ground shook beneath him. With an awful rumbling, the palace disappeared, and Perronick found himself standing close to the forest, where he had led the cattle to graze. Though darkness was coming on, Perronick never thought of entering the farm, but followed the road which led to the court of the Duke of Brittany. As he passed through the town of Enns, he stopped at a tailor's shop, and bought a bright, beautiful costume of brown velvet and white horse, which he paid for with a handful of gold he had picked up from the court of the knight's castle. Thus he made his way to the city of Nantes, which at that moment was being besieged by the French. A little way off, Perronick stopped and looked about him. For miles round the country was bare, for the enemy had cut down every tree and burnt every blade of corn, and the idiot thought he might be. Perronick was able to grasp that inside the gates men were dying of famine. He was still grazing with horror when the trumpeter appeared on the walls, and after blowing a loud blast, announced that the Duke would adopt his heir, the man who could drive the French out of the country. On the four sides of the city, the trumpeter blew his blast, and the last time Perronec, who had ridden up as close as he might, answered him. "You need blow no more," he said, "for I myself will free the town of her enemies." And turning to the soldier, he came running up, waving his sword. He touched him with a magic lance, and he fell down dead on the spot. The men who were following stood still, amazed. Their comrade's armor had not been pierced. Of that they were sure, yet he was dead, as if struck to the heart. But before they had time to recover from their astonishment, Perronec cried out, "See how my folks will fare! Now behold what I can do with my friends!" And stooping down, he laid the golden bowl against the mouth of the soldier, who sat up as well as ever. Then, jumping his horse across the trench, he entered the gate of the city, which had opened wide enough to receive him. The news of these marvels quickly spread through the town, and put fresh spirits into the garrison, so that they declared themselves able to fight under command of the young stranger. And as the bowl restored all the dead Bretons to life, Perronec soon had an army large enough to drive away the French, and fulfilled his promise of delivering his country. As to the bowl and the lance, no one knows what became of them, but some say that Brynac the sorcerer managed to steal them again, and that anyone who wishes to possess them must seek them as Perronec did.